Welcome to Virtual Wednesdays. My name is Francesca D'Alessio, and I'm so glad you could join us tonight. Keep the Valentine's Day festivities going by joining us for this intimate presentation in which independent curator Solio will spotlight two of his loves, fashion designer Patrick Kelly and creative artist Beau McCall. Solio curates entertaining and informative events, exhibitions, and cultural programs. He has collaborated with many institutions and brands, including the New York Public Library, the Museum of Arts and Design, Columbia University, and so many more. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to the one and only Solio.
Hi, hello everyone, welcome. I'm Solio, and today's program, as you heard, is inspired by Patrick Kelly's Love List. So we have the Love List up on the screen. Just a little background, this list was distributed with his press kits and sometimes placed on the seats at his fashion shows. So today is all about love, joy, and fashion. This list included all of the things and people that inspired Patrick and brought him so much joy. So we want you to participate. Please enter into the chat some of the things that you love, some of the things that make you happy, that give you life, that make you feel alive. And at the end of the program, I'll highlight some of your submissions. So please make sure you enter those into the chat. And as you can see on this list, Patrick included people like his grandmother, Ethel Rainey, Betty Davis, the legendary actress, the music of Luther Vandross. I was bumping to some Luther Vandross earlier today to get in the mood. Fried chicken, and of course, buttons. So we'll be talking a lot about buttons. But before we get started, I just want to give you a little bit of formal background. We do have full bios, including mine, in the YouTube video description. I'm an independent curator. I produce exhibitions and public programs for various institutions. But this is all about Patrick and Beau McCall. So Patrick Kelly was born and raised in Vicksburg, Mississippi. His grandmother, a cook and maid, fostered a love of fashion by bringing him fashion magazines from the family for whom she worked. Kelly briefly studied art and history before moving to Paris in late 1979, and in 1988, he became the first American and the first Black designer to be voted into the prestigious Chambre Syndicale. Beau McCall was born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He has been enthusiastically proclaimed by American Craft magazine as the Button Man, and he creates wearable and visual art by applying clothing buttons onto mostly upcycled fabrics, materials, and objects. And I'm wearing some Beau McCall on me now. So let's jump right into this presentation. Next slide, please. So this is me. Actually, sorry, no, this is not me. This is Patrick on the left and Beau McCall. That's their photos. But next slide. Thank you. So growing up, this is me as a kid. Growing up, I enjoyed clothing. I remember being a little boy and sneaking to try on my mother or sister's boots, and the way that the leather felt like armor against my skin, the boost to my ego and height that I got from standing tall in the heels, and the sound of it click-clacking, you know that sound, against the ground. It was really enough to let me know that clothing had power to make us feel a certain way, and I learned that early on. So fast forward to junior high school, and I was experimenting with all sorts of looks. I was tying scarves around the knees of my jeans. I was getting my nose pierced, growing locks down my back. These were all part of my sometimes misguided but courageous attempts at finding myself through style. By the time I heard the name Patrick Kelly, I was still finding myself along this journey. I wasn't a curator and had yet to deepen my knowledge and appreciation for wearable art. But this began to change around 2010 when my life partner, Beau McCall, told me about Patrick. It was during our early courtship days when he was really nice to me. But during that time, I was really curious to know more about these buttons and that Beau was working with in his own designs, and that he had briefly mentioned he made wearable art. So he showed me some of his works and I was amazed. I had never seen anything like his button embellished works. And so like most people, I took buttons for granted, right? They're ubiquitous, they're all around us. And I wasn't aware of its significant history. So since one of the earliest known buttons was found at the Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley, which is now Pakistan, nearly 5,000 years ago, buttons have gone from being ornaments to signifiers of economic and social status, to commonplace mass-produced objects. And during medieval Europe, sumptuary laws restricted the type and quantity of buttons that people could wear in the public. So next slide. During enslavement in the United States, buttons were used to identify the enslaved. This button, circa 1820 on the left, from the collection of the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, would have been sewn onto a person's shirt to identify him or her as being enslaved by Thomas Porter II. And then you also have buttons being used in parts of Africa, such as Congo, to decorate masks and crowns, as seen on the right in this early 20th century hat from the Bawami Society of the Lega Peoples. This is now in the Brooklyn Museum collection. But I knew none of this back in 2010 when Beau and I discussed his button works. I had no idea buttons had this much important history. And during that conversation, Beau mentioned Patrick Kelly as an example of someone else who worked with buttons. And immediately I wanted to know more. So next slide. This is me and Beau 2 years later. We took a trip to see the debut of Patrick Kelly, One Way of Love, at the Philadelphia Museum of Art in Beau's hometown. We both wore some of Beau's creations. He's in a cascade of button chains, and that's me in a button embellished bar. I didn't stuff it, by the way. But in this exhibition, it was Patrick's pieces with button embellishments that made the strongest impression on me. They were vibrant with color. The embellishments added a touch of whimsy that brought a smile to your face. And I was dating someone who worked with buttons. So I want to talk a little bit next about Patrick's works and Beau's works and give a few examples of some of the differences and similarities. So I was really struck by the similarities in their stories, but also by the differences in their approach to working with the button. In the One Way of Love exhibition catalog, Andre Leon Talley, rest in peace, writes of Patrick Kelly, he used buttons as decorative trim. Buttons were used to design motifs, messages, shapes. So on this next slide, we see the decorative trim approach in Patrick's dress from fall/winter 1987-88. This wool and spandex knit has metal buttons trimming the bottom half of the dress and along the gloves as well. Here, the buttons are used as an accent to bring a radiance to the all Black fabric of the gloves and dress. And in this next slide, we see how this approach is different from most of Beau's works. In this image, this is Beau's chocolate sprinkles jacket, created circa 1993. And the button is used less as a decorative trim and more as an actual fabric in and of itself. The upcycled denim jacket it all but disappears, except along the sleeves. And we are left with a double layer sheet of buttons that consumes the entire front side of the jacket. With Patrick's similarly heavily embellished works, we see another slight but important distinction in their application of the button. In this next slide, this is from Patrick's fall/winter 86-87 collection, and we have a wool and spandex knit with plastic buttons arranged in a heart torso. So when you look closely at this, we can see that Patrick's arrangement of the buttons creates a more fish scale effect. And we see that with the buttons arranged in rows, sort of one behind the other. However, in this next slide, Beau has a different approach. In this button apron titled Woodworks from 2021, he begins with a single layer of non-decorative buttons. In this case, it's all plastic matte black buttons that form the base or the first sheet layer. And then on top of that, he arranges the decorative wood and horn buttons for sort of a multi-layered sheet effect. So you have to look really closely to get that distinction between the two. And we also see a difference in the types of buttons used. Most of Patrick's works consist of plastic buttons, and Beau uses a range of buttons, different buttons on a single garment, including plastic, wood, mother of pearl, and more to enhance the depth and dimension of the work. For me, I love both technical approaches. I appreciate the straightforward way in which Patrick uses the button, as well as the intricateness of Beau's approach. So moving on, let's talk about some of the similarities in their personal narratives. And this is really what moves me the most about the two. One of their similarities is their commitment to really finding and sharing joy through fashion. This commitment is even more substantial when you think about the personal backgrounds of both men. Born 3 years apart, Patrick in 1954 and Beau in 1957, they grew up during the Jim Crow era and the civil rights movement. By the time they were teenagers, the Black is Beautiful, Black arts, Black power, and the LGBTQ plus Stonewall movements came to the forefront. In the exhibition catalog, Madison Moore notes that there are stories of Patrick Kelly receiving hate mail from the KKK, being denied entry into Paris hotels, or having difficulty hailing a cab in New York City because of the color of his skin. And for Beau, he also experienced racism. For him, it showed up early on in Catholic school. The nuns frequently treated the Black kids as inferior and made negative remarks about their culture, all of which led Beau and others to being physically abused by the nuns under the guise of corporal punishment. And in the next slide, we see that Beau addresses this experience in some of his visual artwork that also includes buttons. This piece is ABCDEFU. He applies buttons all over a Catholic school chair, and with the button spells out a subtle retort to the abusive nuns. Okay, I hope you get it. So in addition to experiencing racism, you have the fact that both Patrick and Beau were gay and had to contend with the homophobia in the world, which when you add that with racism, it really makes them frequent targets. And yet, despite those hardships, they still found, embraced, and wanted to share with the world joy. Black joy is something that is trending in recent years. It's a popular slogan. And I just want to briefly break that down. So to me, it is the intentional affirmation of one's life and the right to happiness, despite whatever trauma and challenges may exist. It is us telling the world that we will continue to smile, laugh, and find peace of mind, no matter the circumstances, not because we ignore the realities of racism or oppression, but because we refuse to allow it to consume our identity. Fashion for Beau and Patrick became their way of expressing such joy. And so before, it became a popular hashtag, they were using fashion to fight back against these negative forces in the world. And you can see this in a 1989 interview where Patrick stated, "You have to be proud. If you're big, if you're round, if you're skinny, if you're short, if you come to me, you're definitely gonna have a smile," end quote. And similarly for Beau, it's his desire to make people feel good in his clothing. In an interview, he once stated, quote, "Coming from a Catholic school background in Philadelphia, I was in a very conservative environment. And after that, I was able to free myself. So when people wear my work, I want them to feel freedom and happiness," end quote. In this next slide, we can see how Patrick added the sense of joy through his designs in a myriad of ways. Actually, I think go back one more. I'm back again. We're almost there. There we go. So Patrick added the sense of joy in this piece from fall, winter 87 to 88. This is again a wool and spandex knit with plastic buttons. And when I see this, I instantly smile. I hope it brought a smile to your face. I love the whimsical arrangement of the buttons and their colors. And in this multicolored array, the hue that stands out to me the most is yellow. This color is often associated with happiness. And according to color psychology, it produces a warming effect, arouses cheerfulness, stimulates mental activity, and generates muscle energy. So we can see how color is really important to his works to bring in that sense of joy. And in this next slide, we have Beau also using yellow. This is on the left, a button yoke, and on the right, sneakers. They're both titled Sunny, and they're made in 2010 to 2021. And the color yellow evokes that sense of joy again here. And further to the point, you can see the decorative buttons that Beau uses. He uses some smiley faces on the sneakers and on the yoke. And this increases the likelihood that you'll smile when wearing this garment. So, I've experienced this firsthand, the types of joy that their works bring to people. I remember attending an event one day and wearing a piece by Beau. And from the moment I stepped into the room, a woman came up to me saying, how much I made her day and how much she loves buttons. And then she went on to talk to me about a story about how her family collected buttons and how much they mean to her. And I've been on the other side of those experiences as well. I once ran into a woman wearing vintage Patrick Kelly, and my face lit up, and I told her how happy I was to see her wearing such a fabulous piece by Patrick. So it is these micro instances of joy that add up button by button to really fulfill both of their missions of bringing joy to people through fashion, no matter your race, color, or sexuality. So I want to talk a little bit about how they've influenced my personal style. So I've been inspired so much by both of them, and it's quite evident through the way I dress. So as I mentioned earlier, I've gone through several phases of style where I had no clue what I was doing. But during the experimental phase in junior high school, I was bullied and teased. And so it led to me suppressing myself, conforming to style norms, and going back into the closet for a period of time. It wasn't until I went to college that I came out of my shell. And when I met Beau, got introduced to a whole new world of possibilities when it came to style. And among those intros was Patrick Kelly. And since then, I just can't stop wearing buttons. I'm wearing them now. If you go to the next slide, this is me wearing Beau's button yoke, an apron ensemble called Flower Power, made in 2021. This is, again, upcycled denim, yoke, and jeans, buttons, embroidery thread. There's printed latex and a plastic pendant. And what I love about this is the floral buttons that really remind me of springtime happiness, and Beau's technique of webbing, where he sews embroidery thread on top of the buttons, as you can see on the right. And in the next slide, I'm wearing a piece that I commissioned by Beau. It's a do-rag called Hood Classic, the Ice Do-Rag. On the next slide, please. This was made in 2021. And this includes a 6.5 foot long train that features clear plastic buttons and custom ceramic buttons by Glazed Girl Designs. And it really celebrates the diversity of Black hairstyles, from wave patterns to afros to locks. And finally, this next slide, this is me and Beau. We got featured in the New York Times, photographed by Bill Cunningham, the legendary photographer. And I'm wearing a button corset and some button jewelry by Beau, and he's wearing one of his button vests. And so, as you can see with these examples, wearing buttons has really given me an appreciation for the material and opened my eyes to seeing how any object can be transformed into an amazing work of art. And it's because of the examples set by people such as Patrick and Beau that I have been inspired to develop the confidence needed to pull off these looks, because it's not easy. So they created outfits that are meant to make you stand out. And in doing so, I believe that they challenge each of us to be brave enough to express ourselves in new and creative ways through style that brings joy to life. So in this next section, I want to talk a little bit about how they've influenced my personal style. We talked about that, but I want to talk about how they've influenced my work, okay? So they've inspired me to really amplify the voices of other underrepresented Black creatives in fashion. I remember when I first saw Beau's work, I just knew it needed to be shared with the world. And when he introduced me to Patrick Kelly, I wondered why I never heard the name before. I was angry that I never knew the name Patrick Kelly when there were so many other white designers who were household names. And this is because much of our history as Black people has been erased or destroyed. And so becoming a curator has been my way of hoping to correct that by bringing visibility to as many Black people in fashion, like Patrick and Beau, who have been underrepresented in the mainstream. So I just want to give two examples of my curatorial work that fulfill this mission. In this next slide, this is from an exhibition, Styling, Black Expression, Rebellion, and Joy Through Fashion, which was a 2020 exhibition presented in partnership with Long Gallery, Harlem, and Nordstrom. The contemporary exhibition included individuals who were emerging or mid-career and not yet known largely by the mainstream. If you go to the next slide. It was important for all of us who were involved in this exhibition that we use the platform of Nordstrom to really amplify these voices in fashion. And to that end, we ensured that we secured press for the artists. We ensured that the artists were paid for participating in the exhibition. And Nordstrom also provided additional retail space for a pop-up shop where the artists sold their works, and Nordstrom generously waived their cut of any sales. So when we talk about supporting and uplifting and amplifying, we have to make sure that we do that with an economic factor as well. On the next slide. On a conceptual level, the exhibition was about exploring the multifaceted representations of contemporary Black style and their cultural significance. The exhibition celebrated the legacy of using personal style to channel self-expression, rebellion, and joy as inspired by movements such as the Harlem Renaissance. So I mentioned in the exhibition's title is the word joy. And on this next slide, we see that example. So joy is about how Black style has always been a source of happiness and pride, despite whatever challenges we face in the world. And these are Afro wigs by Ricky the Jones of Afro Lip Gloss Originals, which bring a sense of joy and vibrancy to the exhibition through their flamboyance and their color. I remember giving tours to people, and each time we turned the corner and saw these wigs, people would smile and feel a sense of pride in the Afro as a symbol of Black hair and beauty. And there's an artist, Sage Gallen, who posted a 15-minute video on Facebook where he takes his followers through the store, and at the end of the tour, he is in tears. And they're tears of joy because the work has inspired him and moved him and brought him some joy during these crazy times. And I'd like to think that Patrick would approve of that. This next exhibition, next slide, please. Most recently, last year, I curated Showing Out Fashion in Harlem at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. This exhibition continues my work in lifting up Black creatives and celebrating the joy that fashion can bring. But this time, I came from a historical perspective. So the show honors the legacy of the Harlem Institute of Fashion, founded by Lois K. Alexander Lane in 1966, and that's her on your screen. She founded this organization at a time when there weren't many opportunities for Black talent in the fashion industry to show out and to gain greater visibility and opportunities. And I learned about HIF again through Beau, who was a member of the collective from 1988 to 1994. Again, I was amazed that I never heard about HIF until quite recently. Next slide. As the umbrella organization, HIF branched off to include the National Association of Milliners, Dressmakers, and Tailors, also founded in 1966, and the Black Fashion Museum. And this is a button from the museum, which was founded in 1979. So through these three organizations, the HIF team provided courses, seminars, and workshops, workforce development, and the collection, documentation, display, and preservation of the work by Black creatives in fashion. Next slide. One of the most impactful ways that they were able to do this was by offering fashion shows to the public, produced by Lois from 1979 to 1996 for the annual festival Harlem Week. With their eye-catching costumes, dramatic one-way presentations, and embrace of the local communities, the shows became one of the most popular programs during the event, and they were held right on the streets of Harlem. They provided an opportunity for so many emerging and mid-career Black designers, models, and administrators to show out and obtain recognition, economic empowerment, and professional development. And simultaneously, the shows gave people joy in the roles and that Blacks have played throughout fashion history, pride and joy. So by foregrounding the legacy of HIF, and you can move to the next slide, the exhibition honored the underrepresented trailblazers who were showing out decades ago, both on and off the runway, in the ongoing fight to advance social justice in fashion. Next slide. We brought a lot of joy to viewers. They loved seeing some of these archival photos. It was amazing during the show's run to witness how happy people were that this piece of history was being shared. Their faces beamed, at some of the elaborate and fun costumes featured in the shows. Next slide. And it was great for them to see the models and administrators recall with such passion how happy being part of that experience made them feel. Next slide. I'm really proud of this exhibition because I think as we talk about, Black Lives Matter and Black joy, we really have to come from a historical perspective as well and remember the trailblazers before us who paved the way. So it was wonderful to educate the public about HIF through this exhibition. So, in looking back on some of these highlights from my personal style and my curatorial career, I'm so grateful to have Patrick and Beau be such strong inspirations in my life. They've inspired me to express myself without limits, to find joy in life through fashion, to continue doing all I can to amplify Black fashion creatives. And for that, I love you. So that's my presentation. And now is the interactive portion. So let's see if we have any questions. I'm just gonna open up the chat and we can drop the screen share. Okay, let's see. Okay, someone said gorgeous shirt. Thank you so much. So this shirt is in the museum. So we can drop the link to that, to the gift shop. But also this is I'm gonna go this way, is a Patrick Kelly shirt here. And then this is a piece here straight out of Mississippi. Okay, and so Beau McCall made this shirt, which is called triple t-shirt. So the 3 t-shirts in one, and you can wear them several different ways. So thanks for recognizing the shirt. Let's see. Do we have any other questions or comments? And I want to make sure you guys are putting into the chat the things you love. So please let me know what you love, what brings you joy, because I'm going to share a few of them. Oh, here's a question. All right, let's see. So could you tell us about your headpiece? Yes, I can. So actually, Beau made this headpiece. So you see it? So these are buttons. Okay, so these are buttons. And originally, it's so funny, when he made it, it was meant to be worn as a neck piece. And I was playing around with it. And I was like, let me try and put it on my head. For some reason, I just love putting things on top of my head, crowns. I guess they make me feel taller. And so I put it on my head and it worked. So, that's the fun thing about fashion. You can make of it what you want and have fun with it. And I think that's something that both Patrick and Beau really exemplify. Okay. Thank you, Marty. I'm glad you love it. Okay, come on. So do we have what do we love, folks? I'm gonna tell you what I love. Well, I already told you, but I'm gonna tell you again. I love fashion, I love style, I love peace of mind, which is so important. Okay, let's see what we have here. We have something coming through. Hey, Nana. Yes, the wigs are fabulous. So make sure that you check out Ricky, the Jones of Afro Lip Gloss Originals. He makes those amazing wigs. So I just want to take this time to thank you all for tuning in. I hope I didn't talk too fast. Special thanks to the team at Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and of course, to Patrick Kelly and Beau McCall. Great, thanks for dropping in. Oh, sorry, another question came through, hold on. Someone says, everyone here loves Patrick Kelly. Please go view the Versace Spring Summer 2022. Yeah. When I watched it, yeah, I saw the influence theft. Am I wrong? Yeah, so, that's the interesting point about the influence versus theft. Because, it's really challenging because there's so many people creating in the world and people are inspired. So for me, it's theft when you don't make it your own and when you don't acknowledge that there were others who did this before you. That for me is theft. But inspiration is fine. We can live with inspiration. And it was so cool because when I discovered Beau, I thought he was the only person in the world at the time working with buttons. And he was like, no, there's Patrick Kelly, there's, so many other people. And so when I researched and found all these other people working with the material, it really opened my eyes, and each of them do it in a unique way that makes them their own, makes it their own. Okay, question, what happened, and this is probably the last question, what happened to the Harlem Institute of Fashion and the Black Fashion Museum? Why did they close? That's such a great question. So unfortunately, Lois K. Alexander Lane became ill. And so her family had to care for her. And so she really was, you know, the leader, the head of the organization. So it was hard to find someone to carry on that legacy. And so they had to shut it down. They did have a DC one that opened for a while when she moved back to DC, but eventually that closed. And, you know, when you think about Black people in fashion, one of the challenges is sustainability. And a lot of that deals with economic sustainability. And so she, you know, she was coming out of pocket for a lot of things. She didn't have the sort of big grants that other institutions were getting. And so it was hard to sustain and carry on. But I'm so glad you asked that question. And we are carrying on the legacy with many organizations in Harlem now that are doing similar work that Lois did. So it's important to remember her and the HIF team. All right, so thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really enjoyed it, and good night.
Thank you so much to Solio. Tonight's program was in support of our exhibition Patrick Kelly, Runway of Love, now on view at the DeYoung Museum until April 24th. For more information on our upcoming programs, exhibitions, all of the wonderful things happening at the museum, please check out our website and book your tickets in advance online at tickets.famsf.org. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you next time.